Hello and welcome to News in Depth on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. US President Donald Trump delivered his annual State of the Union address on Tuesday, but many observers noted the limited attention given to foreign policy. At the same time, Poland's access to the EU's safe loan aimed at strengthening its defence industry faces political resistance at home. To break it all down, we're joined by Marcin Zaborowski, he's Europe editor at TVP World. Marcin, welcome back. Great to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure as always. So, as always, before we kick off, let's listen to this short soundbite and then I'll get your view on it.
And we're working very hard to end the ninth war, the killing and slaughter between Russia and Ukraine, where 25,000 soldiers are dying each and every month. Think of that, 25,000 soldiers are dying a month. A war which would have never happened if I were president, would have never happened. As president, I will make peace wherever I can, but I will never hesitate to confront threats to America. And NATO countries are friends and allies. They are. They're our friends and they're our allies. Have just agreed at my very strong request to pay 5% of GDP for military defense rather than the 2%, which they weren't paying. We were paying for almost all of NATO. Now they're paying 5 as opposed to not paying 2. And getting that 5% was something which everyone said would never be done, could not happen. We got it really easily with one meeting. And big difference between 2% that's not paid. We were paying the freight of many of them. Very few were paid up. Now 5%, then they're paid. And everything we send over to Ukraine is sent through NATO, and they pay us in full.
Right. I mean, what we saw there was pretty much all that he said in the whole of his address, which was an hour and 48 minutes long. I mean, I think he broke his own record. So it's not very much, but what we have, what he did say, what do you make of it?
Well, I mean, the entire speech was really about self-achievements and about how great president he has been and about what fantastic job he's done. There is no achievement regarding Ukraine because he promised the Ukrainians and the entire world that he would deliver peace within 24 hours. Nothing like that happened at all. And in many respects, situation has actually escalated in Ukraine since he came to power. So it didn't have much to brag about. When it came to Europe, well, there was some kind of achievement he had there, but indeed the Europeans are paying more now for defense spending, which in no small part is result of pressure from the White House. So that's why you had not 15 seconds, but perhaps 40 seconds in talking about Europe. But definitely none of these items didn't receive as much attention as hockey.
Right, yes, of course, America beat Canada for the first time in decades, I believe. And so that was a big deal.
And the hockey team was there.
And the hockey team actually, joined them all. Yeah, it's okay. So really, there wasn't anything new in terms of what he actually said. You know, I forced NATO to push up NATO countries push up their donations, and it would never have happened. The Russian war would never have happened. Now, there is something. I mean, there seems to be a bit of a split between what President Trump says about Ukraine and Congress, because a bipartisan bill has just been produced, which wants Congress to provide more support for Ukraine, which, as we know, President Trump has been reluctant to do. What does that tell you, that dichotomy? What does that tell you about what Americans think of President Trump's policy when it comes to Ukraine?
Well, the opinion polls are indicating that the moods on President Trump's handling of foreign policy has soured across the board in the United States, and his overall approval ratings have gone down very, very considerably. But what's surprising is that indeed his approval ratings within the conservative base, including MAGA base, when it comes to the handling of foreign policy, is now negative. So when it comes to the handling of crisis in Ukraine, that he's not there with a mood of a nation, and you could, in some respects, you could really see it in this room in the Congress, where many senators had pins with Ukrainian flags there, and Ukrainian flags were being waved, but President almost. Like for him, it's not an issue to talk about, and it's not an issue to talk about because there is nothing that he can be proud of when talking about Ukraine. There is no achievement. He doesn't want to own this war in any way. In many respects, he actually keeps saying, this war would have never happened if I were the president. He wants to push the issue away. He does not want it to be his issue.
How then, I mean, if we extend the attitude towards Ukraine across the EU, how do you see his attitude, his approach, his level of support for Europe and the relationship between the US and the EU going forward?
Well, it's clear that for him a relationship with the EU is transactional. So he now says that when it comes to the issue of security and defense, when it comes to trade relations, despite all the hiccups about tariffs that perhaps we would mention soon, he thinks that the Europeans are partners in business, and in fact he even used the word that they are the allies, our friends and allies, which was, for Trump, it was relatively warm. So you had it there.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned tariffs, and you're right, I did want to bring it up because, of course, when he first mentioned them, it caused an enormous shock. But then a lot of his tariffs were shot down by the Supreme Court. They said that Trump didn't have the authority to impose them. But in his speech, he said it's not going to make much difference to my economic policy. And actually, most of the countries on whom I've imposed tariffs want to keep things the same way because they know that it could get worse. Does this really signal a new stance economically between the EU and the US?
No, it doesn't. I mean, he's right in a sense that he's saying that, well, okay, perhaps, these tariffs that I impose, we cannot proceed with them because of the rulings of the Supreme Court. By the way, the judges that he appointed to the Supreme Court were sitting a meter away from him, and he was not happy with them. They were conservative judges, his appointees. So yes, he's right that ruling was about the method of imposing the tariffs. So that method was being questioned. That doesn't mean that there are no other methods of imposing the same tariffs, and he is proceeding accordingly. He is basically saying he will find a way to impose these tariffs in any way, in such a way which would not require congressional action.
Right, so it's probably better for the trading partners to keep things as they are rather than make them worse.
It's definitely the trading partners had no reason for celebration.
Yeah, okay. I do want to move on to SAFE, but before we do, I just want to speak briefly about Iran. He didn't say much about Iran either, except that there was one thing for certain, and that was Iran could not be allowed to have nuclear weapons. So what do you read into that? I mean, he's been fairly consistent with this, hasn't he?
He's been consistent on that, and on that particular issue, Congress was with him. So, when he spoke about Europe, when he mentioned Ukraine, he had applause from the Republican side or parts of the Republican side, but the Democrats were sitting. When he spoke about Iran and about not letting Iran to become nuclear ever, the whole Congress was standing up and applauding him. So this is obviously the issue which brings both sides of the aisle together. and that they suggest that whoever becomes president in the United States in the future, the course in Iran would be similar.
It's likely to be the same. But also we have the midterm elections coming up in November this year, and if both houses actually lose their Republican majority, then those sanctions against Iran are still likely to go on in the second half of the Trump presidency.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, Trump's approval ratings are currently not great. To compare with, they are in the region of between 36 to 38%, depending on the poll. But they are 14 percentage points less than they were during the last time when he was delivering State of the Union address. So that's a considerable difference. And he really lost big time amongst the independents. So only about 25 to 26% of independents are happy with the job he's doing,
Right.
which by the American standards is very low.
It is low, yeah.
So, and most predictions for the congressional elections are suggesting that that the current advantage that the Republicans are having will be reversed, but it's not a straightforward issue, because whilst Trump is becoming unpopular, the Democrats are not becoming very popular. Yeah?
Right.
So the Democrats are also having a problem of the crisis of leadership, one might say.
So the American public has quite a difficult choice ahead of it. Now, I'd like to move on to the European Union's so-called safe loan, and I'd like to get your view on that. But before that, we have a short soundbite I'd like to share.
Drones and anti-drones. We as Poland are also building the Eastern Shield, so a lot of this money will be spent on building the Eastern Shield, also for the Safe Baltic Sea program, so that we can protect the critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea.
So that was Magdalena Czarnecka, and she was talking about what Poland is going to be doing, or needs to be doing, with the Safe Loan. Now, the Safe Loan is a European Union loan, which is very cheap compared to other commercially available loans, and Poland has applied for just under 44 billion euros worth, and that's been approved by the European Union. What's not to like?
So Poland is by far the biggest beneficiary of this loan. The entire amount of money available is 150. And Poland got nearly a third of that being approved. Yeah? So much more than any other country in the European Union. It's a cheap loan, and everybody who's been taking more loan or paying a mortgage knows the difference between a cheap loan and not cheap loan. Yeah? So basically the difference is numerical. It's not charity, it's not a grant, it is still a loan. And one of the things which domestic critics have been saying, and we have to mention here, that the issue is very contentious domestically, meaning that the government approves it, the opposition is deeply against it.
I want to get to that in just a second, but before we do, I'd just like to highlight one thing, and I'll get your opinion on this. Look, Poland has a border with Ukraine. Ukraine is under attack. Poland has been supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russian, and Russia's made no secret of the fact that it doesn't like Poland very much, and so if Ukraine were to fall, surely it pays for Poland being on the eastern flank of NATO to be more than ready. So how can there be any dispute that this money should be taken and used for defence?
Well, there are two major issues. Issue number one, it is that the money is being disbursed with some conditionality. So meaning that if Poland starts breaking the rule of law, if we have too much corruption, Commission can hold this money. Yeah? Just as it did with the funds for COVID-related relief. Yeah. And that's what happened under the former government of Law and Justice, who is currently in the opposition, is conservative opposition, and they are very worried that if they by any chance win next election, they might be in a situation in which the programs are approved, but the money is not coming there because they've been considered to be, acting against independence of judiciary and having proven cases of corruption as they had before.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, it's about where this equipment is coming from, what is being produced. So the Law and Justice government of the past, they made lots of orders in the United States and in Korea. And money from the European funds is meant to be spent in proportion of over 80% on the equipment produced by European companies. So that would mean that Poland's procurement policy would need to fundamentally change. Away from reliance on the United States towards domestic companies, because the government is saying that most of this will be domestically produced in any case, but it could be also domestically produced by European-owned companies from France, Germany, other countries.
Right. Well, but surely that ties in quite well with Trump's insistence that Europe needs to be able to stand on its own when it comes to defence. And surely, I mean, Europe has to, in any case, build up its defence industry. So again, I ask the question: why should the opposition be against this loan? I mean, there is President Zaborowski is currently considering his response to this, but the indications are not positive.
President Zaborowski has a real problem here with that, because public opinion is in favor of the loan. 60% wants the president to accept the new law and not veto it. Whereas the opposition, who has selected Mr. Zaborowski and paid for his campaign, is calling on him to veto the bill and to start to block the approval of the loan. So he's going to be between either way, between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, he's got his political allies. On the other hand, he has the government and the public opinion. And also somewhere he's got the armed forces, and armed forces also are very much in favor of that loan being adopted.
Right.
So whatever he does, he's going to be in trouble.
Someone's going to be unhappy with it.
Yeah.
But the other argument I've heard the opposition use is a loss of sovereignty if this loan were to be accepted. How does that work?
It's obviously a nonsense, but I mean, the key thing about when they are saying about loss of sovereignty, they are referring to this issue of conditionality, meaning that money could be stopped by Brussels if Poland acts against the independence of judiciary.
Right.
And the former government exactly did that. Money was being stopped, and then there was an outcry about the loss of sovereignty.
Okay, now in the last minute or so that we have left, Marcin, there is an economic issue here as well, isn't there? I mean, Poland only has 4 years in which to spend this money, which is not very long. There's going to be an election in the middle of that, but you know, at some stage, Poland will need to repay it. How do the numbers work out economically? Does it make sense in that sense?
Economically, very much makes sense, because, as we said before, the loan is guaranteed to be cheap, on 3%. So, which is considerably less than Poland would be paying on the open market, because Poland now is covered by the so-called excessive deficit procedure. I mean, we have a too big deficit, and that means that when we go to the market and we want to borrow money, the premiums on whatever we can get is very, very high. And in that case, just interest will be so much cheaper.
Right, so it makes sense anyway, economically as well.
Absolutely.
Marcin, unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there, but as always, thank you so much for sharing your analysis.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.